poor Apache widow pleaded with the lone cowboy to take her as his wife. The desert had a way of making grief feel louder. The wind carried it, the sand buried it, and the wide, empty land gave it no place to hide. The Apache widow moved slowly across the dry ground, her steps careful, her eyes always watching. Every sound made her heart tighten. Every shadow reminded her of what she had lost. Her husband had been gone for many months now. One night of violence had taken everything from her. There had been no time to say goodbye, no chance to prepare. One moment she was a wife, a woman with a place and a future, and the next she was alone with a child and a silence that never ended. Since then, life had become a daily fight against hunger, fear, and loneliness. The land that once fed her people no longer gave enough. The tribe had broken apart, families scattering in different directions, each trying to survive in their own way. Some went north, some followed rivers, others disappeared into the mountains. She stayed behind longer than she should have, hoping things might change. But hope did not fill empty hands. Each morning she woke before the sun, her body aching, her heart heavy. She gathered what little food she could find, always saving the best pieces for her child. She spoke softly to the child, even when her own voice wanted to break. She could not afford weakness, not now. That day the heat came early. The sky was pale, almost white, and the air felt heavy. She walked toward the edge of the open land where she had heard travelers sometimes pass. Settlers, traders, or lone riders who crossed the desert without stopping. She did not like being near them, but hunger was stronger than fear. She had almost turned back when she saw him. A lone cowboy rode slowly across the plain, his horse tired but steady. Dust clung to his boots and clothes, and his hat sat low over his eyes. He did not look like a man in a hurry. He looked like someone who had nowhere to be. There was something quiet about him, something closed, as if the world had taught him not to expect kindness. The widow stopped walking. Her heart pounded hard in her chest. She knew what approaching a stranger could mean, especially someone like him. The stories were not kind. But she also knew what would happen if she did nothing. Hunger would not wait, neither would winter. She stepped forward slowly so he would see her. The cowboy noticed movement and reached toward his side without thinking. When he saw her clearly, he stopped. His hand fell away, but his eyes stayed sharp. He looked at her clothes, worn and faded, at the child pressed close to her side, at the tired strength in her posture. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved between them, lifting sand and dry grass. The widow felt her mouth go dry. She had practiced words in her head, but now they seemed too small. "I mean no harm," she said finally, her voice low and steady. Speaking his language was not easy for her, but she had learned enough over the years. "I only wish to speak." The cowboy studied her face. He had seen fear before, had seen lies too. This was neither. What he saw instead was exhaustion mixed with pride. He nodded once, a small movement. "Say what you need to say," he replied. Her hands trembled, but she did not hide them. "I am a widow," she said. "My husband is gone, I have a child. We have little food, little safety." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I ask for help." The cowboy looked past her, scanning the open land as if expecting trouble to rise from the ground. "I don't have much myself," he said. "This land takes more than it gives." She swallowed. This was the moment she had feared most. Still, she continued. "I do not ask for charity," she said. "I ask for a chance to live." He raised an eyebrow slightly, surprised by her calm. "And what kind of chance is that?" The widow took a breath. Her chest tightened, but she stood straight. "Take me as your wife," she said. "In name, if nothing else, give us shelter. I will work. I will be loyal. My child will obey. We will not be a burden." The words hung heavy in the air. The cowboy stared at her, clearly not expecting this. He looked away, jaw tightening. Marriage was not a simple thing. It was a promise, a responsibility, something he had avoided for years. "You don't even know me," he said quietly. "I know enough," she replied. "You are alone, So am I. Silence stretched between them. The horse shifted, restless. The cowboy rubbed his face, eyes dark with thoughts he did not share. He had spent years keeping his distance from people, from ties that could be broken. He had learned that caring often ended in loss. "You shouldn't make such an offer," he said, "not to a stranger." The widow lowered her gaze for a moment, then looked back up. "Desperation teaches people to speak plainly," she said. "I have nothing left to protect but my child." Something in her words struck him. He had seen men fight over land, over pride, over nothing at all. This woman fought only to keep her child alive. That kind of strength was rare. "I can't promise anything," he said at last. "I don't stay in one place. Trouble follows me." "I am already living with trouble," she answered. "At least with you I would not face it alone." He looked at the child then, small and quiet, eyes watching everything. The child did not cry or cling, only stood there, trusting the woman beside them completely. The cowboy felt something shift inside his chest, something he did not like to name. "I'll think on it," he said. The widow nodded. She did not beg further. Pride still lived in her even now. "Thank you for listening," she said. He turned his horse, dust rising as he began to ride away. The widow stood still, her heart sinking with each step the horse took. She told herself she had expected this. Most men would have left sooner, but then the cowboy slowed. He stopped. For a long moment he sat there, his back to her, shoulders stiff. Finally he turned his head slightly. "Where are you staying?" he asked. Hope flickered in her chest, small but bright. "Near the dry creek," she said, "under the old trees." He nodded once. "I'll ride by tomorrow," he said. "No promises." That was all. He rode off, disappearing into the heat and dust. The widow did not move for a long time after he was gone. Her legs felt weak, her hands cold despite the sun. She knelt and pulled her child close, pressing her forehead to the small head. "Maybe," she whispered, not knowing if she meant hope or warning. As night came, she built a small fire near the creek. The stars filled the sky, sharp and endless. She thought of her husband, of the life she once had, of how quickly it had been taken. She wondered if she was wrong to trust a stranger, but she wondered even more what would happen if she did not. Far away, the cowboy rode through the dark, her words echoing in his mind. He had meant to leave the area as he always did, but something held him back now. Something he could not easily turn away from. By the time the moon rose high, both of them lay awake, staring into the same sky, knowing that tomorrow could change everything. Morning came quietly. The sky turned pale, and the desert cooled for a short while before the heat returned. The widow woke before the child, listening to the wind move through the trees near the dry creek. Her body was tired, but her mind would not rest. Every sound made her look up, wondering if the cowboy would come, or if yesterday had only been a moment of hope that would fade like so many others. She packed what little they had. There was not much to carry. A small bundle of food, a worn blanket, and a few tools she used every day. She moved with care, not wanting to wake the child too early. When the child stirred, she smiled and spoke softly, trying to sound calm even though her heart beat fast. They waited. The sun climbed higher, the air warmed. Still, there was no sign of him. Just as doubt began to settle heavy in her chest, she heard the sound of hooves. Slow, steady, coming closer. She stood, shielding her eyes. The cowboy appeared from behind a low rise, riding the same tired horse. He looked different in the daylight, less like a shadow, more like a man carrying the weight of many years. He slowed when he saw them and stopped a short distance away. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," she replied. He nodded, then looked around the camp. "This place won't hold long," he said. "No water worth staying for." "I know," she said. "That is why I asked you." He was quiet for a moment, then dismounted. He tied his horse to a tree and walked closer, hands visible, movements careful. "If we do this," he said slowly, "it won't be easy." She met his eyes. "Nothing has been easy." He looked at the child again. "I won't hurt either of you," he said, "but I can't promise comfort." I can promise work and shelter, and a name that might keep some people away." She nodded. "That is enough." He took a breath, as if making a decision he had avoided for a long time. "We'll travel together for now," he said. "There's a small place west of here." "Not much, but it's mine." Relief washed over her so strong her knees almost gave way. She did not show it. Instead, she bowed her head slightly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This is an agreement, not a storybook." "I understand," she replied. They began to move before the heat grew too strong. The child rode for a while, then walked when tired. The widow kept pace, her steps sure, her eyes always alert. The cowboy walked beside the horse, leading it slowly so they could all stay together. They spoke little at first. There was no need for many words. Still, silence between strangers can feel heavy. After some time, he spoke again. "What should I call you?" he asked. She hesitated. Names carried history, belonging. "You may call me Ayana," she said at last. He nodded. "I'm called Thomas." She repeated the name quietly, testing the sound. As the day stretched on, the land changed slowly. Rocks gave way to open plains, then low hills. The sun burned overhead, and they rested when they could. Thomas shared what food he had without making it feel like charity. Yana accepted with dignity, making sure the child ate first. By evening, they made a small camp. Thomas built the fire while Yana prepared what little food remained. The child sat close, watching everything. When night came, the air cooled and the stars appeared one by one. Thomas sat across the fire, his face lit by the flames. "People won't like this," he said quietly. "Some will judge. Some will look for reasons to cause trouble." Yana looked into the fire. "I have known judgment all my life," she said. "It has not stopped me from living." He nodded slowly. "You're stronger than most," he said. Strength, she thought, was not a choice. It was something the world demanded. The next days passed in steady travel. They shared tasks without discussion. Yana gathered and cooked. Thomas hunted when he could and watched the land for danger. At night, they spoke more. Not about feelings, but about survival, about where to find water, how to avoid trouble, which paths to take. On the fourth day, they reached the place Thomas had spoken of. It was small. A simple house, worn by time and weather, standing alone on open land. The fence leaned. The roof needed care, but it stood. It offered walls and a door. "This is it," Thomas said. Yana looked at it carefully. It was not much, but it was more than she had hoped for. "It will do," she said. They stepped inside. Dust covered the floor. The air smelled of old wood and quiet. Thomas opened the windows. Light poured in. "You can stay here," he said. "I'll sleep outside for now." "There is room," she said calmly. "We will share the space." "That is part of the agreement." He studied her, then nodded. "All right." That night felt different, safer but strange. Two lives brought together by need, not choice. Yana lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house. Thomas did the same on the other side of the room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how his life had turned so suddenly. In the days that followed, word spread. People in the nearby town noticed Thomas was no longer alone. Some stared. Some whispered. A few were openly unkind. Yana felt their eyes on her skin, but she held her head high. She worked harder than anyone expected. She cleaned, repaired, planted what little she could. She never complained. Slowly, some people softened. Others did not. One evening, Thomas returned from town with a tight jaw. "Someone asked questions," he said. "Not good ones." Yana paused, then nodded. "We will be careful." That night, as the wind shook the house, Thomas finally spoke of his past. Not all of it, just enough. He spoke of mistakes, of walking away when staying might have cost too much. He spoke of loss, though he did not give names. Yana listened without judgment. When he finished, she said only, "The past does not own you." He looked at her, surprised. "You really believe that?" "I must," she said. "Otherwise there is no future." Silence followed, but it was a different kind. Less heavy, more thoughtful. Outside, the night stretched wide. Two people who had begun as strangers now shared a fragile path forward. Neither knew what would come next. only that turning back was no longer an option. Life at the small ranch settled into a steady rhythm, though nothing about it was truly easy. Each day began before sunrise. The land demanded effort, and neither of them could afford to rest for long. Iana rose first, as she always had. She swept the floor, checked the small fire, and prepared simple food from whatever they had managed to save. She worked quietly, careful not to disturb Thomas or the child. Thomas watched her more than he realized. He noticed how she moved with purpose, never wasting energy. She did not complain about the cold mornings or the long days. She fixed what was broken with patient hands and learned quickly how things worked on the ranch. He had expected questions, hesitation, maybe fear. Instead, he saw calm strength. The child adapted even faster. Laughter returned in small moments, quiet but real. That sound did something to Thomas. It reminded him of a life he once believed was not meant for him. Sometimes he caught himself standing still, listening, unsure how such a simple sound could feel so heavy and so warm at the same time. The house slowly changed. Dusk gave way to order. Small repairs made it safer. Iana planted seeds near the back, working the hard soil until her hands were sore. She spoke to the earth softly, as if it could hear her. Thomas pretended not to notice, but he saw how the plants began to grow, stubborn and alive. They spoke more now, not about love or promises, but about daily things, about the weather, the land, the town, sometimes about the child's future. Those conversations were careful, respectful. They were learning the shape of each other's lives without pushing too close. Still, the town did not forget them. When Iana went with Thomas to town for supplies, eyes followed her. Some people whispered, some turned away. A few were openly cold. Thomas stayed close, his presence a quiet warning. Iana felt the tension but refused to shrink. She walked with her head high, meeting stares without challenge or fear. One afternoon, as they left the store, a man muttered something sharp under his breath. Thomas stopped, his body tense. Iana touched his arm gently. "Not worth it," she said. He looked at her, surprised. "They don't get to speak like that." "They will speak," she replied. "We decide how much power their words have." Her calm unsettled him more than anger ever could. He nodded and walked on. At night, the house felt different than before. Not warmer exactly, but fuller. They ate together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with small talk. Thomas fixed things by the light of a lamp. Iana mended clothes or told quiet stories to the child. The past stayed present, but it did not control every moment. One evening, a storm rolled in fast. Wind howled and rain hit the roof hard. The fence gave way in one place and Thomas rushed out to secure it. Iana followed without hesitation, holding a lantern steady while rain soaked them both. "You should stay inside," he shouted over the wind. "This is my home too," she shouted back. They worked side by side until the storm passed. Mud covered their clothes and exhaustion weighed on them. When they finally stepped inside, both were shaking, cold and tired. Iana handed him a blanket. Their fingers touched briefly. It was nothing, and yet it felt like something. Thomas pulled back first, clearing his throat. "Thank you," he said. She nodded, saying nothing. That night neither slept easily. Thoughts moved in circles. Thomas wondered when responsibility had turned into something else. Iana wondered when safety had begun to feel like belonging. Trouble came quietly, as it often does. One afternoon, Thomas returned from town with a hard look in his eyes. He set his supplies down slowly. "Someone's been asking about me," he said. Iana paused. "Who?" "Men from my past," he replied, "or people connected to it." She did not ask for details, she understood enough. "Will they come here?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "I hope to stay hidden." Iana felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Fear was not new to her, but she refused to let it rule her. "If they come," she said, "we face it together." Thomas looked at her then, really looked. "You didn't sign up for this." "I signed up to survive," she replied. "And so did you." Days passed with tension hanging in the air. Thomas watched the land more closely. Iana stayed alert, keeping the child near. The simple peace they had built felt fragile, like glass. One morning, Thomas saw tracks near the edge of the property. Fresh, deliberate. His jaw tightened. He said nothing at first, not wanting to spread fear, but Iana noticed the change in him. "You saw something," she said that evening. "Yes," he admitted. "They're close." Iana took a breath. "Then we prepare." They worked late into the night, securing doors, hiding what little they had. The child sensed the change and stayed quiet, watching with wide eyes. Iana knelt and held the child close. "We are safe," she said softly, even if she was not fully sure. Thomas stood nearby, feeling something twist inside him. He had brought danger to their door. The thought sat heavy in his chest. The next day passed slowly. Every sound made Thomas tense. Toward evening, 2 riders appeared on the horizon. They did not approach the house right away. They circled, watching. Iana stood beside Thomas on the porch. She did not step back. "This isn't your fight," Thomas said quietly. "It is now," she replied. The riders stopped at a distance, then turned away, disappearing as suddenly as they had come. The message was clear. This was not over. That night, Thomas sat alone for a long time after Iana and the child slept. He stared at the dark, listening to the quiet land. He had always believed running was safer than staying. But now, running would mean leaving more than a place behind. Inside, Iana lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of how far she had come, of what she had risked. She realized something that surprised her. She was no longer pleading to survive. She was choosing to stand. Outside, the wind moved across the plains. 2 lives, once broken and separate, now stood at a turning point. The choice ahead would demand courage neither of them knew they possessed. The quiet days on the ranch ended the morning the first riders appeared. At first, Iana thought they were travelers, maybe traders passing by. But their slow, deliberate pace told her otherwise. There was no doubt. They came with intent. Thomas saw it too, standing beside her as they watched from the porch. His jaw tightened, hands brushing against his belt, though no gun rested there yet. "They've come for me," he said quietly, his voice tight. Iana placed a hand on his arm, steadying him and herself. "Then we face them," she said. Her words were simple, but in them lay a strength that surprised even her. She had survived loss, hunger, and danger before. This was no different, except now she was not alone. Thomas nodded. The wind stirred, carrying dust across the plains, and with it came tension that could be felt like a weight pressing down. The riders circled the small homestead, testing boundaries, letting the tension stretch. One of them dismounted and walked closer, scanning the property, the house, and then the figures standing firm on the porch. "You shouldn't have come here," Thomas called, his voice firm and steady. His posture was tall, commanding respect even without words. The rider smirked. "You can't hide forever," he replied. His tone was meant to provoke. Iana stepped forward, a surprising calm in her movements. "We are not hiding," she said. "We are standing. You can leave peacefully or you can face consequences." The rider hesitated, taken aback by her courage. Few women spoke this way, and fewer still stood as if they owned the land. Thomas noticed the way her eyes did not waver, the way she carried the child nearby without fear. It gave him a strange mix of pride and unease. He had underestimated how much she had grown since the first day they met. Suddenly, one of the other riders tried to move closer, pushing past the edge of the fence. Thomas drew his stance, ready to step in, but Iana did not flinch. She raised her voice with a quiet authority. "Stop, this is our home. I will not allow harm here." The riders exchanged glances, surprised by her strength and conviction. Slowly, they realized this was not a place for easy threats. A silent warning passed between them and they backed away, mounting their horses once more. The leader gave one final look, a promise that this was not the end. Then they were gone, leaving dust swirling behind them. Thomas exhaled slowly, tension leaving his shoulders in part but leaving new concern in its place. "They'll be back," he said. "They can come," Yana replied. Her voice was firm, steady. "We will be ready." The next days were tense. Thomas reinforced the fences, checked the horses, and worked on securing their small homestead. Yana organized supplies, made small traps, and ensured the child was safe at all times. They both understood that danger might return at any moment, but neither let fear dominate their actions. At night, the wind whispered across the plains, carrying memories of the past that Thomas had tried to bury. He sat outside, watching the stars, thinking about the choice that had brought him here. He had intended to avoid attachments, to walk alone and leave the world as quietly as possible. But now, Ayana had changed that. Her courage, her loyalty, and her unwavering sense of responsibility had tied him to something bigger than himself. Inside, Ayana prepared food, her hands steady despite the tension outside. She spoke softly to the child, explaining in gentle words that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to stand despite it. The child listened, eyes wide, absorbing the lesson in silence. The following morning brought a storm, heavy clouds rolling across the sky. Rain pounded the earth, turning dust to mud. The riders did not appear, but the storm itself became a test. Fences bent under wind and trees threatened to fall. Thomas and Ayana worked side by side, securing what they could. The rain soaked through their clothes, chilling them to the bone, but neither stopped. When the storm passed, the sun broke through clouds, painting the plains with golden light. For a moment, the world seemed calm again. Thomas looked at Ayana, noticing how her hair clung to her face, how her hands were scratched and dirty. She was exhausted, yet there was a quiet strength in her posture that he could not ignore. "You're remarkable," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I survive," she replied. "You survive. That is all anyone can do." But survival was no longer just about existence. It was about protecting something worth living for. Thomas realized that the bond between them had grown stronger. What had begun as an arrangement born of desperation had started to become something more, a connection forged in courage, respect, and shared struggle. Weeks passed, and the ranch slowly returned to a sense of routine. They worked together, repaired what was broken, and even planted new seeds for the coming season. Life was not easy, and dangers from the past still lingered, but each day brought small victories. The child laughed again, filling the home with sound that neither of them had dared to imagine months ago. Then, one evening, a messenger arrived at the edge of their property, a man on horseback, urgent in his movements. Thomas recognized the symbol on the rider's coat. It was a warning. "They know where I am," Thomas said, his voice tight with tension. Jana placed a hand on his arm. "Then we fight if we must, but we do it together." The words were simple yet powerful. Thomas looked at her, seeing not only a partner in survival but a companion in life. Someone who had chosen to stand by him, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of loyalty and courage. As night fell, they prepared for what might come. Weapons were checked, fences repaired, and the child brought inside for safety. They did not speak much. Words were unnecessary. Their shared understanding was enough. The next morning, shadows moved on the horizon. Riders approached, more determined than before. But this time, Thomas did not hesitate. He stood tall, Ayana beside him, and together they faced the threat. The child watched from behind them, safe and secure. What followed was not just a confrontation, but a test of everything they had learned. Thomas and Ayana worked together seamlessly. Her courage balanced his strength. His experience guided her decisions. Each action was measured, precise, and intentional. By the end of the day, the riders realized they were not facing a lone man. They were facing a family united in purpose. The last rider turned, signaling the others. Dust rose as they departed, leaving the homestead quiet once more. For the first time, the threat felt temporary. For the first time, Thomas understood that he no longer wanted to run. He wanted to stand, protect, and build a future here with Ayanna and the child. That night, they sat together near the fire, exhausted but alive. Words were few, but the bond between them was clear. Survival had brought them together. Danger had strengthened their connection. And now, in the quiet moments between storms and shadows, a new life began to take shape. One built not only on necessity, but on trust, respect, and the first quiet stirrings of love. The world outside remained uncertain, and challenges were far from over. But inside that small homestead, Thomas and Ayanna had discovered something stronger than fear. They had discovered each other. And they knew, without needing to speak it aloud, that whatever came next, they would face it together. The days that followed were quieter, though the memory of danger lingered like a shadow on the plains. Thomas and Ayanna had survived the first wave of threats, but they knew more could come. Each day, they woke before sunrise and worked together, building fences, tending animals, and repairing the small house. Yet the work was no longer only about survival, it was about building a life. Ayanna had grown into her role not just as caretaker, but as an equal partner. She moved with a confidence Thomas admired. She knew the land, understood its moods, and could anticipate challenges before they arose. The child was happier now, laughing and playing in the small yard, a sound that brought warmth to even the hardest days. Thomas found himself watching her often, sometimes when she was unaware. There was a quiet strength in her that he had never seen before, a combination of courage, intelligence, and resilience. He realized he no longer viewed their marriage as an obligation or bargain. It had become a choice, one he made every day simply by staying. The small town nearby began to notice the changes too. Some people softened, seeing Ayanna's quiet determination and Thomas's steadfast support. Others still whispered, but their voices carried less weight. The ranch stood as a symbol of what could be accomplished with hard work, patience, and unity. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the plains in golden light, Thomas and Ayanna sat on the porch, the child nestled between them. For the first time, there was no talk of danger or survival, only the warmth of the fire and the peaceful hum of life. "You've changed this place," Thomas said softly, "and me too." Ayanna looked at him, eyes reflecting the fading light. "We've both changed," she replied. "We had no choice but to grow," Thomas smiled, something rare and genuine. "I used to think running was the only way to stay safe, but now I can't imagine leaving." Ayanna leaned her head against his shoulder. "You don't have to," she said simply. "This is home. We are home." The child looked up bright-eyed. "Mom, can we plant more seeds tomorrow?" "Of course," Ayanna said, her voice warm, "and we'll watch them grow just like us." Winter approached slowly. Frost touched the edges of the roof and the plains grew crisp and cold. Thomas and Ayanna worked together to ensure the house was warm, the animals fed, and the child clothed in layers to keep safe from the chill. Nights were long, but the fire inside the home kept them warm, both physically and emotionally. The hardships they had faced had formed a bond stronger than words. Each challenge, hunger, threat, or loss, had made them rely on one another in ways neither had anticipated. Thomas's guarded heart had slowly opened. Ayanna's cautious hope had blossomed into trust. Together, they had turned a fragile beginning into a firm foundation. One morning, a rider appeared at the edge of the property, but this time it was not a threat. It was a neighbor, bringing news of townspeople who wanted to trade and share resources. Thomas welcomed him, and Ayanna offered bread and fresh milk from the small herd they had nurtured. It was a small gesture, but it symbolized acceptance, a world reaching out rather than closing in. The seasons changed, and with each passing month, the ranch flourished. Crops grew, animals thrived, and the child learned the ways of the land, guided by both parents. Ayanna taught patience and care, while Thomas taught skill and caution. Together, they gave the child the safety and freedom they had both once longed for. In the evenings, Thomas and Ayanna often sat quietly, watching the sunset. Words were unnecessary. The bond they shared had grown deeper than conversation could express. Love had formed in unexpected ways, born not from fairy tales, but from hardship, trust, and shared survival. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of the fence damaged by winter storms, Thomas stopped and looked at Ayanna. "We've come a long way," he said. "From strangers to partners to this." Ayanna smiled, wiping dirt from her hands. "From desperation to choice," she said. "We built this together." He reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "I don't want to go anywhere ever again," he said quietly. "You don't have to," she replied, squeezing his hand. "This is ours." The days rolled on, each filled with small victories. A harvest successful enough to share with neighbors, repairs completed before storms, and laughter shared on long afternoons. The ranch became not just a home, but a place of healing and growth. As spring approached, the land bloomed with new life. Flowers sprouted along the fence, green shoots pushed through the soil, and the child ran freely across the plains, laughter echoing in the wide open space. Thomas and Ayanna worked side by side, the rhythm of their lives intertwined. One evening, Thomas stood at the edge of the property, watching the sunset, and realized how far they had come. What had begun as a plea for survival had grown into a promise of life, love, and family. He thought of the day he first met Ayanna, of the desperation in her eyes, and of the courage she had shown. He understood now that the bond between them was stronger than fear, stronger than loss, stronger than anything the world could throw at them. Ayanna joined him, standing close, the child running ahead to chase a rabbit across the field. She leaned her head against his shoulder, looking out over the land they had claimed together. "We are safe," she said softly. "Yes," Thomas replied, "and more than that, we are home." The wind blew across the plains, carrying dust and the scent of spring. The homestead, once fragile and uncertain, now stood strong. Their love, born from hardship and forged through trust and courage, had created a life neither could have imagined. Together they faced each day, not as strangers bound by necessity, but as a family united by choice, loyalty, and love. The past no longer controlled them. The future was theirs to shape. And on that small ranch in the wide-open plains, the poor Apache widow and the lone cowboy had found not only survival, but a life worth living, a life full of hope, courage, and lasting love. The sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the plains, and for the first time, Thomas, Ayanna, and the child felt the quiet certainty that they belonged, together forever.